This is Rob Chappell.
This is Nicholas Garton.
And this is Omar Waheed.
And it's 365 Amplified for Friday, January 31st. It's already the end of the month, you guys.
Yeah, it's almost February.
Oh, you gotta pay rent.
Happy Black History Month. Write the check. We are going to jump right in. We have Jeanette Figueroa-Cole joining us later to talk about the District 10 race. She's the Common Council president, so has a lot of other stuff to talk about as well. But first I want to address the interview we had last week with Sean Barnes, the outgoing police chief, who said some stuff. And I was able to push back a little bit during the interview, as listeners will remember. But I admit I was not knowledgeable enough on the Office of the Independent Monitor to really call him out on the misinformation he was giving me. And I also don't want to pile on. I mean, he's leaving. Like, we don't need to make a big deal out of him specifically. But I do want to sort of educate folks on what the Office of the Independent Monitor actually does, which I have learned in in response to what Sean Barnes was telling me last week. And basically, if you go back and listen, he was ready to talk about it too, because I brought it up, and he was primed. He had his answers ready to go, and I have since learned, sort of second, third hand, and I don't want to report officially on it yet, but that other people in the police department were surprised to hear him talking this way about the Office of the Independent Monitor, and he also gave all the same talking points to CityCast as well. But basically, he was upset that they hired Greg Galembiak, thank you, as the data analyst, who, he has a history of being critical of the police. And Barnes's point was that if the Office of the Independent Monitor would just stick to its original mission of just taking complaints and investigating those complaints, that would be fine. If you hire a data analyst to go looking for problems, that's beyond the scope of what you want to do. And not only that, but if you are investigating complaints, you don't even have an investigative process. You don't have, if you go to Walmart and say, well, I want the security camera footage from this period of time, Walmart's just going to say no. All of that is wrong. Literally every word of that is wrong. I actually called Greg Galembiak, and I wrote something up to post in the afternoon after the podcast dropped. So I did kind of correct this in writing, but I want to correct it here too. That basically, if you look at the ordinance, you look at the sort of the mission of and the scope and the memorandum of understanding, which Sean Barnes signed between the city council and the police department, is that it's not just the complaint department. There's already a complaint department, right, at the police department and at the Police and Fire Commission. The Office of the Independent Monitor is literally intended to proactively and independently find problems in the police department. This is literally what they're supposed to do, using data, and they're supposed to have unfettered access to that data.
I thought that was clear. I thought we all knew that's what they were supposed to do.
Yeah, it was. It was clear. It was in the ordinance. It's literally what the Common Council approved. It's what was in the memorandum of understanding. But Chief Barnes didn't think so.
So his understanding of the independent monitor that monitors the police is different than what he thought. The police chief didn't know
right.
What that
or he did know and is just now pretending he didn't know because he doesn't like who they hired as a data analyst.
Well, nobody does in the city, because Dr. Galembiak has been extremely critical of all of these things. That's why they were trying to sack the Office of the Independent Monitor in this, budget cut for that the referendum for the city ended up funding. But his position specifically was the one that the city of Madison was looking to cut.
Right, and so he was brought on a sort of an hourly consultant basis in September. There was a budget amendment did ultimately pass that allowed the office to hire him full time. So he just started in December. He's not been wreaking havoc for months. in the police department. He
Yeah.
has been requesting data, and he told me that the data team and the folks, the sort of rank and file officers in the police department are like, okay, here's what whatever you need, we got it, Whereas Chief Barnes was more reticent about data and about how the way he thought data requests were supposed to go. But it's very clear that the Office of Independent Monitor is supposed to have unfettered access to whatever records and data that they request, whether or not it's in response to a complaint.
Right, because they're trying to monitor the culture and the trends, and so that's what they're looking to do.
Yeah, right, and that's what John Barnes didn't understand or didn't. I don't know. The other thing is that he complained about the investigative process and how are they supposed to do an investigation, but the fact is that they do actually have subpoena power. So if they do go to Walmart and say we want the video footage from this incident, they can compel Walmart to give it to them. And I don't think Chief Barnes understood that either. But we do have a new interim chief starting. We'll have a search for a new police chief. It'll be a new relationship with the Office of Independent Monitor and the Civilian Oversight Board. And hopefully based on like the actual mission and charter and ordinance that created that office in the first place.
Which is this. Robin Copley, who's the monitor, told me, Chief Barnes had to know this. This was in September that he told me, if we can identify patterns, behaviors, outcomes, or complaints across the department, that's something the data analyst can analyze, and then those become things I can be auditing.
Auditing, not responding to, right? This is a proactive. And I asked Greg because John Barnes said they're just looking for problems, and I'm like, yeah, that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to look for problems, which they can then help you solve. That's the point. All right, so we've got that sorted, I hope. And again, I did push back a little bit, but I was not knowledgeable enough about the actual ordinance. I thought that was the case, but I didn't want to do it right there. And I did record a little bit of an addendum last week, but I wanted to just be real clear about that. So that's going to be different going forward, I hope. The other thing we wanted to ask about, Nick, the school board heard testimony regarding the charter school, and your eyebrows just went up because they heard a lot of testimony.
They had 2 hours of public speakers, and I heard that there were 15 people who showed up to speak at the last moment who were not allowed to speak.
Oh, because they hadn't registered?
Right.
And ahead of time. And each person gets 3 minutes, right? So 2 hours that's a lot of people. But what was the general sentiment of those? You were at the meeting, so what was the general sentiment of the people?
I mean, the general sentiment was positive towards the charter school proposal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, full disclosure, Omar, these were all people who showed up with John McKenzie and Michael Johnson. So
That makes sense.
Well, that's how you do it, right? You marshal your support, and you bring all the people who are going to support you to the council meeting or the school board meeting in this case. That's how these things are done.
Michael Johnson would like to make it clear to listeners and readers that they have overwhelming support in the black community, that Monday's meeting was the most black men he has ever seen at a school board meeting speaking about any topic, and that, they have plenty of black representation on their board and plenty of black representation and support in the community, and that anyone opposing this is just a small band of folks.
Yeah, how many people spoke against it?
3 spoke against it. I'll just be candid. 3 spoke against it, and 32 spoke for it. Mm-hmm. But the 3 who spoke against it were the only people asking legitimate questions about. There was support. Michael is right, but half of the people, or at least some of the people, were there, didn't know what they were talking about. We're there to support a new opportunity for black and brown youth, which we all do, but didn't have the specifics because those specifics, whether legitimately or not, have not been laid out.
No, we also got a copy of their actual application for the charter that they submitted to the school board. Does that have any specifics in it?
I mean, that has basically, the information we've already posted,
Okay.
what they're sort of looking to do. Michael told me yesterday on the phone in an interview that they're still going to, their goal is to operate inside of an MMSD existing school. I asked him how that would work logistically with 600 students.
Which is their goal, is 600 students eventually.
100%. And like which high schools specifically might have that level of space.
Mm-hmm.
He pointed out that Shabazz is doing some renovations. They might look into something there. I don't know.
That's a small building.
It is a very small building.
I don't know. That's what he told me.
But that's one of the specific things that we know, that they're looking to use existing facilities, right, which is cost saving. I will say also, what was those three people who were opposed? What were they saying?
The people who were opposed were saying that they don't believe this is what is sort of necessary, that there's existing resources. April Kagea said that all of this money they're willing to put into the school would better be split between places like One City and MMSD schools.
Yes.
That was the gist of most of the people who spoke against it.
Understanding that the school itself will be funded by public funds, right? It would become part of the Madison Metro School District budget. Right, which some people who have been opposed to this, there's a lot of opposition, like on Facebook. Folks are commenting and sharing and writing on Facebook, but who didn't show up to the school board meeting. Facebook is not where public policy is made necessarily. So, but one of the objections is that it would take away money from Madison Metro School District, which is not exactly true.
It would reallocate funds that would be assigned for students who would be enrolled in the normal public school system.
Yes.
And it would reallocate it to charter schools, which would deprive the overall school system, because it's not a dollar for dollar amount per student. It's just general funding that gets allocated per student and has an overall effect on the school. So when you have more schools in the system and then more students are going to it, it decreases the ability for other schools to actually do all the services that they're meant to do.
Right. It would still be the district, but it would be allocated to a different school, basically. If the school board does not approve the charter, however, and they do go through the University of Wisconsin to get the charter, which is sort of Plan B, then that money would actually leave the school district, right, and would go directly to this school. But we should mention, beyond the school district funding, that there's already been a significant investment of money just in the planning process, right? John McKenzie has put in $500,000 already, is what Michael told us. Yeah, right. So, but that's the money they're talking about. Like, if you want to make the argument is, if you want to make a big difference, you could just make a big fat donation to Madison Metro Schools.
Now, Allie Muldrow pushed back against that concept a little bit.
She's on the school board, right?
Yeah, and she's treasurer currently, a former school board president. Mm-hmm. She said that money's not totally the issue here, that they have like $500 million budget for MMSD.
Right, so
and
even
$500,000 is not making the difference that some people are saying that it would.
Right, that makes sense.
Joe Gothard's big issue previously has been actually getting those funds to the schools, because they take a weirdly long amount of time. So when he's coming in from Minnesota, he's still saying it's going to be the same problem. So 500,000, sure, it does make an impact, but how long does it actually take that
also
trickle into the schools?
Yeah, and how much? I mean, $500,000 buys you like a 3-bedroom house in Madison. Like how is that going to significantly or appreciably affect any 600 students, in any.
Yeah, that is true. Now, I did reach out to Joe Gothard's office. I haven't heard back yet. Michael assures me that he's, supportive and that they've had productive conversations with him. But I do not have any specifics about what those conversations looked like.
And do we get any sense? I mean, okay, I'm going to go back a little bit because we talked about this last week and the week before that January 27th was going to be an informational meeting. That's what we were told. It turns out to be it was actually the public hearing at the school board, which is also an important thing, but it wasn't informational exactly. It was more like testimony in favor or against, which is all great. But
that was the weirdest part of this.
Yeah, that we were looking. You went there looking for specifics and for information and how it's going to work and who's going to be running it and that kind of stuff. But it was more. It was part of.
I could not have been the only person misled. Not misled is not the right word.
Just with different expectations.
But it seemed like there was going to be this huge community presentation of like, this is the school. This is a rendering. This is
right.
All of the things that we're going to be. And I think members of the school board were expecting that, as I know Ollie was expecting that.
And didn't get it?
They did not make any presentation.
So instead it was just 32 people at John McKenzie saying that this school is great and
yes.
we should do it?
More or less, yeah.
We needed more than that. And I think that they are very defensive. Many of the speakers, are respected leaders in the community, but seemed like they were taking the tack that, like, if this doesn't happen, it is another blow against, like, black kids in particular, versus, like, really being like, hey, we love MMSD, we want to be part of it and work together. It was a very standoffish vibe for us talking about, like, doing stuff with a bunch of kids.
Right. And, you will say, going all the way back to race to equity in 2013, the disparity between black and white students in this school district in terms of proficiency in math and reading is higher than anywhere else in the country almost. So, and hasn't really improved. So there is something to be said for, you're not doing it, let's try something different. Right?
Sure.
But that alternative is, let's just push them all into the trades instead of...
Well, that's another criticism.
People are saying economically that's what's needed. You see the mannequins here at our podcast station here with the salaries that each person can make in those fields.
There are trades that make a whole lot more than I do.
Yeah, but that's also the high end after spending 30
yeah.
years. It is a little misleading about it. The reality is most of them will be making 30 to 45,000 up until a very far point into being into the trades, which is something that they're not extremely transparent about in a lot of these programs.
That's fair.
But it is still a pretty good avenue for some students, but I don't think you should be building a whole school to push them out of formal education.
Well, they also will say that the FCCA stands for Forward Career and College Academy, and that engineering and those sort of things will be part of the curriculum as well. But it definitely has more of a trades focus than the rest of the high schools, I guess.
Michael says they can't develop the curriculum until they know if they're in or not.
Shouldn't you develop the curriculum first to give proof of concept?
I'm just reporting what he said.
Fair enough.
I can see his point too, though. Like we want to know who's going to be our charter before we start to align with, so we know whose curriculum standards we're aligning with, that kind of thing. Maybe, I don't know. But thank you, Nick, for that reporting. And again, this will continue to be contentious. It'll continue to be debated. Do we know when it's on the school board agenda?
I'm not sure yet, but I'll find out.
Okay.
But next month, the board is voting on it.
That's what the idea was, that they would get it on the agenda for next month. All right, when we'll be there. One of us will be there. Nick, you'll probably be there. But thank you for that reporting. Last thing I want to talk about before we get to our interview with Jeanette Figueroa Cole, is the Trump administration. They used to be, going back to 2011, there was something called the Sensitive Locations Memo, which basically said ICE agents can legally basically enforce immigration law wherever they want to, but let's not go into schools, let's not go into churches, let's not go into hospitals and healthcare settings, because it's just not like productive. Like we're not gonna go arrest a first grader because that's just a waste of resources. Even and in the first Trump administration, they continued to honor that policy. Last week, they pulled the plug on it, and so now basically rescinded that memo, meaning ICE is now allowed internally to target schools, target churches, target healthcare facilities. So with that in mind, I got to thinking, so what if an ICE agent shows up at a school? What's going to happen? So I asked all 15 school districts here in Dane County, and I'll maybe do another round of this outside of Dane County as well, but all 15 school districts in Dane County, I asked, what's your policy? What happens if an ICE agent shows up? 5 of them didn't respond, which is, okay, they're busy, understandable. Not all of them have, like, the thing about Dane County is there's a wide range of school districts, right? There's Madison, which is huge, Sun Prairie, which is pretty big, and then you like Wisconsin Heights, which is in the middle of, like, between Mazo and Black Earth, and has a whole school district in one building. They don't have like a PR person fielding questions from people like us. But anyway, so 3 school districts also said we don't want to say what our policy is. And I think part of that is like we don't want to draw any attention. We don't want to give ICE a reason to show up and start harassing us. We don't want to like advertise that we have basically like an anti-ICE policy or whatever. But 4 districts, which are Belleville, Madison, McFarland, and Sun Prairie, all said we're not going to collect information. We don't care if you're documented or not. And if we happen to know that, we're not going to share that with any other agencies. And if ICE shows up, and even if they say they have a warrant, they're not getting in the school. Here's why. First of all, I talked with an immigration attorney named Grant Severn from Portals, but he basically educated me on this, that you have to have a judicial warrant to enter a private place. Private place generally being like your home, right? School, it's kind of a gray area whether a school is a private place or not, but now with every school district locked down all the time, it kind of is a private place, and it's sort of been now accepted in the past 5 years that only people who belong in the school are going to be in the school during the day, teachers and staff and students. So if any law enforcement shows up that's not like the SRO, they're probably not going to get in without a judicial warrant. Now, ICE has these administrative warrants where they'll come to your house and they'll say, I have a warrant. You got to let me in. That warrant does not carry any weight in terms of the 4th Amendment to the Constitution, because the way Grant Severn characterized it to me is this quote: an administrative warrant is like a letter from a federal agency to themselves that says we have authorized ourselves to allege that this person is deportable. Carries no weight legally. Right? So, and those 4 school districts have basically said we are not going to comply with any administrative warrant. That follows DPI guidance that was put out just last week from the State Department of Public Instruction saying you don't have to comply with an administrative warrant. These 4 districts are saying proactively we're not going to. So for those 4 districts, if you're undocumented, like the school district's not going to let the ICE agents into the school. We don't have any necessarily evidence that ICE agents are targeting schools in Dane County, or that even ICE is even more active in Dane County than they were before. But I know a lot of families are nervous. Even families of documented immigrants and of citizens are nervous about just being harassed, you know. And the thing is, like, they don't even necessarily need a warrant to go to a school. Like, they could just go to school, knock on the door, and try to be let in and look for people to deport. But these schools are saying, we're not going to do that. The other handful of school districts that did reply basically don't have any policy specific to ICE, but do have law enforcement policy. And ICE, basically, they just sort of consider ICE like that. Like, they're not going to let you in necessarily without a warrant. They're not going to let you interview a student without parents' permission. Some of them kind of will say, we'll notify parents if police want to interview a kid, but not necessarily get permission, okay? And that's all in my article on Madison365.org. So, again, it's uncertainty is kind of the point, right? Like, it's not necessarily that they're going to come deport you, but it's that they want you to fear that might happen at any moment.
Why are they targeting schools? I mean, we've seen reports that they were at an elementary school. There's no criminals in second grade in an elementary school. Like, who are you going in there to arrest?
It's easier to find the families.
Yeah, if you're trying to deport a whole family and you can snag a 6-year-old, like, the family's going to. I think the idea is that it'll be easier to get the whole family if you have a kid in custody. Again, it's not clear that they're targeting schools, but they want people to feel that they will, or that they could at any moment. And that's why they rescinded the memo. It's not that they're actually going to go after schools, but they want folks to feel like that might happen. They want people to be scared, and they want people to be to just leave, just self-deport, is what Mitt Romney used to say. So the purpose of this piece and the purpose of the DPI guidance and the purpose of some districts are proactively emailing families saying, don't worry, we got you. So hopefully quell some of those fears a little bit, maybe. But if it happens, and the other thing I'll say, this happened in 2017, it's happening again now. Folks on Facebook are announcing ICE spotted on Zaire Road. You know, ICE is in Cottage Grove. You know, I would encourage people not to do that, right? Because almost always it's not ICE. If it is, they're doing just normal ICE stuff and, like, actually prioritizing criminals, which is what they used to do. But now they're saying this: we want to deport everybody, so they're sort of reallocating those resources. Or oftentimes, going after trying to confirm reports of ICE 6 years ago, it was almost always just police. But because everybody's so heightened about ICE, like, they see a cop car, they think it's ICE. I can't stress this enough. The whole point is for us to be afraid and to be uncertain. And when you say ICE is here and then you share that, like, that just helps them keep everybody scared. So be very cautious about sharing information about ICE and about immigration enforcement. Anything else? I think we're good. I think that's a podcast.
Yeah, that's a podcast.
I think so. All right. We'll be right back with Jeanette Figueroa-Cole.
Big Brothers Big Sisters of Wisconsin, in partnership with NFL Inspired Change, is launching the Big Draft, a statewide campaign to recruit 700 new mentors. Backed by NFL players, ambassadors, and Mark Murphy, president and CEO of the Green Bay Packers, the campaign aims to empower Wisconsin's youth by scouting mentors ahead of the 2025 NFL Draft in Green Bay.
From February to April 2025, 14 Wisconsin agencies will recruit 700 bigs statewide, including 100 in Dane County, with a focus on diverse volunteers who reflect the backgrounds of the youth served.
And mentorship transforms lives, providing support and opportunities for youth to reach their full potential.
Big Brothers Big Sisters need community champions to spread the word, become bigs, or help us recruit others.
Your generous donations will directly support the Big Brothers Big Sisters mission to empower young people in our community. To contribute, please visit bbbsmadison.org/give-2/donate. Again, that's bbbsmadison.org/give-2/donate. And we're back, and joining us now is Jeanette Figueroa Cole. Did I say that right?
Yes, you got it. Yes, you got it.
Very good. She's the City Council President and the Alder for District 10 on Madison's Southwest side, and is running for a third term. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a little bit chilly, but it's pretty warm in here.
you were before we started. You were saying winter's difficult for a person here from Puerto Rico.
Yes, correct.
My wife has the same problem. She's from San Diego.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
now, tell us just a little bit of background. I mean, your constituents probably know this, but for other folks around the city, how long have you been in Madison? What brought you here?
Yeah, so I am a business process analyst as a profession.
Mm-hmm.
As a profession thing, and I've been doing that for a while. Mm-hmm. And just last April, I retired. So this is like a new phase on.
Okay.
We haven't really explored how that is going to work. So I have been very busy, but I have been out in Alder since 2021. Mm-hmm. And on the second term, I started by being the vice president of the council, mm-hmm. and in the second year of the second term, I have been acting as the first Latina mm-hmm. council president mm-hmm. for the city of Madison, which is incredible given that we have so many people here that mm-hmm. Can participate in the process. From a very early age, my parents, they raised 6 of us, and they instill in us a duty to serve people. Mm-hmm. We came from a family with very limited resources, but that didn't seem to matter when it came with serving others. I mean, like if someone needed housing for the night or whatever, my dad he will bring them home and give them a room. Like it was just that kind of thing. It was no mm-hmm. question. Mm-hmm. Every time that there was a natural disaster, we were, no matter how old we were, how young we were like, we're going to go and make collections, and you're going to partner with the church people or whoever, and mm-hmm. you're going to be out there in 100-degree weather picking up collections and picking up money to serve those people. Uh-huh. So I think those values have transferred here to me. I've been here since 1991, and since then I have worked with organizations that focus on the unsheltered population. When we had the Hurricane Maria hit the island, we organized and we collected over $90,000 mm-hmm. that then we distributed, and we put a process in place to distribute that funding mm-hmm. and took to the island to people mm-hmm. In the island to serve their communities. And I have volunteer on the neighborhood associations. And when my kid was at school, I was the teacher's photographer or the math tutor. So volunteering and doing, the little bit that I could has always been a part of our story here. Mm-hmm. I have 2 sisters, and my niece are here, and they're also very oriented on community mm-hmm. services. My journey here started in 1991, and I have been reflecting a lot about that lately with all these what is happening nationally. Mm-hmm. So I migrated here because I'm a U.S. citizen from birth. So Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens. Yep. So I can move in and out. I can be back and forth between the island and here, mm-hmm. Just like any mm-hmm. other citizen. Mm-hmm. So, but I came here when I was 22 years old, and making that decision of leaving everything behind. Your parents, your grandmother, your food, everything, mm-hmm. To come to a place that you know nothing about. Like, who knows where Madison, Wisconsin was? Like, everybody knows who Chicago is, where New York is, but Madison, Wisconsin. So it was a very hard decision, but at the same time, I was just looking for a job. I wasn't running away from my life. I didn't need any protection from the government. It's just, the policies of the United States imposed on the island, and the way that the island runs, politically pretty corrupt, it just creates an environment that's still happening on the island today. People just forced to be here. So I've been reflecting on understanding of all the immigration issues that we have right now. Mm-hmm. I only understand that piece, making the decision to leave everything behind. But so it has been very tough this past week, thinking of how people, especially the immigrant community, is in a constant state of fear of being deported, of not dropping the kids at school and not having someone picking them up at the end of the day. So I feel the privilege of the citizenship, but this whole news cycle is really starting to pile up. Mm-hmm. So it has been on my mind a lot. But yeah.
Does that affect your work on the council? Is there anything city council can kind of do about that, or does that does the change in administration change how you approach being city council at all?
Not exactly. I mean, the first time that this happened, the council put forward a resolution where they asked the police department not to voluntarily participate with ICE. So we had that in place, and the fast forward over the years, a standard operating procedure was put in place that they use. So I think on that regard, we've done as much as we can. That doesn't mean that we have power over ICE, right? So I don't want to create a sense of security that we can provide. During one budget season, I think the second budget season, we used some ARPA funding to help the immigrant community in Madison that were struggling with housing and things like that. But again, ARPA funds are pretty much gone too. So, so I think in times like this, definitely the answers are not going to be coming from City Hall. The answers are going to be coming from the grassroots organizations that are within the community, within these communities at all times, like the Centro Hispano, like the Jewish Center. So the people that are actually working with those that are in need, and our role as the rest of the city should be to support those organizations, support them financially, to volunteer with them, to make sure that misinformation is not being spread out. So yeah, that's where my mind is. Like, how can I support Voces de la Frontera? How can I help them get their message out? But it really is time for the entire city to rally around these people and try to protect them the best that we can.
What about in your district specifically? Obviously, as city council president, you're thinking about citywide issues and things. What are you hearing from constituents as you're knocking on doors and just talking to folks? What are the most important issues for folks in District 10?
So the most important, the thing that it comes up all the time, like a regular, is speeding in the city roads, but that's across the board. That's just like, it seems like after COVID, that is a topic, national topic.
Yeah.
But I know for us of elders, I'm almost certain that every district has the same top concern. So that will be the one thing. For District 10, yes, we have made some changes to some roads like Hammersley Road that used to be very, very wide street that promotes speeding. We changed that by narrowing the road and creating a multi-purpose path for all ages and abilities lane. So it's protected for bikers and for walkers and for anyone that has mobility issues. So I would like to see that repeated in other areas. I mean, Raymond Road, with so many schools in that road, it's really terrible. Midvale, the same. There's Nakoma. There's just all these roads where there are kids around that there's a lot of speeding happening. So that will be number one. Another thing that we have, the second thing that is also, I think, across the board is evictions. We are having some pockets of the population in my district are really confronted with eviction notices, so that housing insecurity component it is difficult. And then District 10 is the second largest Latina population. So we also deal with these language barriers that are so, that the city is still working on getting better at to serve people with different language skills or needs.
The reckless driving issues have been a big thing in Milwaukee too. People forgot how to drive.
The drive
after COVID or something. I don't know.
Yes, I know, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah, it really is. You mentioned housing and evictions, obviously, and affordable housing, and that's something that the council's been working on. Is there any? What are the next steps in terms of getting more affordable housing, either in District 10 or citywide?
Citywide, yeah. I think I keep on answering this question the same way because I mean, there's really one way in my mind to answer it. We are behind on building housing stock. That's just like we shouldn't. Like I was looking at 2019. What was happening in 2019 during the campaign season, and nobody's talking about housing. I'm like, how is this possible? Like, how all of a sudden housing has become such a big deal the last 4 years, at least since I've been here. So I'm glad that it's finally put on the front burner. I decided to run because of the unsheltered population and because of the need of low-income housing to be set up on the city. But then as you get into the city with all these aspirations, you realize that there's also a lot of mandates from the state that controls what happens at the level. We have to obey some rules above the ordinances, and then you just start you need to figure out and learn to navigate those constraints and figure out how to create policy that will support the housing stock. So I strongly believe that we need all types of housing. It's not just low income housing. We need workforce housing. We need ownership. We need rentals. We need stock. And some of the things that the city has done that I find I'm very proud of. We have created a transit overlay policy that pairs up with our affordable housing funds. So what those essentially does is saying if the developer wants to use our affordable housing funds, you have to build in the areas where are closer to transit and effective, like rapid transit or 50-minute interval transit. So that actually allows for people to live in places where they have access to transportation, and having access to transportation gives you access to everything else, to resources, to downtown, to activities. So that's one policy that we had done that helps. It doesn't sound like it's directly related to affordable housing, but it is, because they're married together. We have put in place the TDM, the transportation management demand policy that also helps us then decentralize the use of vehicles. So we're always going to have cars. That's the point. Is not getting rid of cars, but it's just providing more opportunities for people to be able to get to work via bike, via walking, whatever, by the bus. So having employees kind of pick up the cost of having those different methods of transportation. So it lowers the carbon footprint and provides more options. And then the green streets. Green streets is also attached to both of those things. It just brings them together. We have just creating more housing that is smart and is sustainable, and that we have more green spaces, and that the streets are designed instead of having these very, very wide streets that we had before. In this, if you go and look recent developments, like these enormous roads, now making them narrower, because we know that is a calming visual if you had narrow streets, and then having protected bike lanes, having spaces for people to walk. So I think those three policies are some of the things that I'm most proud about, and we have to continue to look at the zoning code also, and making sure that we eliminate things that were specifically put together with the intent of redlining and keeping segregation. So that those are the things that we have worked on to get on the housing. We don't, the developers are the developers, and again, they have a lot of protections under the state, so they're going to build. But if we try to make policies that will make them want to work with us and use the affordable housing funds. So then we can say, okay, you're using our money. We also need market rate, but we also need 30, 60, 80 levels of affordability in this development.
Yeah. You mentioned zoning, which, I mean, it's easy for people to say, like, how can zoning be racist? But as you mentioned, like, it has been used for basically redlining, for maintaining segregation. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works and how you can, how things can be different?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at a graph the other day that shows specifically the size of the homes from 1973 to now. Like the houses used to be like about 1,400 square foot things, and so the lots are designed for that size of house. Right. But then as of right now, all you see is these gigantic places, right? Taking so much land for one family to live in. So that's kind of one way that we can look into, like, reducing the lot sizes and to make it more welcoming to have multiple either duplexes or quadruplexes or whatever, or having ADUs in the backyard. So that's one way that we can try to clean up that. There's still a couple of things in our zoning laws that allows for exclusionary zoning, meaning that was specifically made to keep specific people out of those areas, right? And definitely I don't understand why will anybody in the city will want to be, allow that to continue to happen. But it is there. The type of houses that can be built. The zoning code tells you what type of houses can be built. So do we have a lot of protections for detached houses, right? Detached single unit houses. And we wanted to figure out ways to remove some of those barriers so we can include additional types of housing for renters, for other people that want to own in different ways. It doesn't have to be just a single attached family home. And the other thing that is important to recognize, which I struggle a little bit because, when I'm talking about unsheltered population, we're talking about often families, and you see a lot of families out on the shelter. And I also want to talk about my roots as a Latina. Our families tend to be large. But the reality is that the people that is moving here are people that the population of when it comes to family keeps on decreasing. So you're not having a couple that is having 6 kids or whatever. Right. It's just 1 kid, 2 kids. So over the years, that continues to decrease. But yet we're still building for the bigger families when, and then those big houses, the families that actually need them, they can afford them. So there's a lot of data out there showing all those discrepancies, and at the center of all of that is, again, zoning protections for choosing from one type over the other. And I think there's a few places that we can clean up and make that better.
And I'm just thinking of District 10 and the new District 10. It is a lot of multifamily housing, isn't it? Is it more than other districts or not?
I'll say there's some pockets of multi-family housing. There's a few areas that may have duplexes, like Arbor Hills area. There's a road there that I was, you don't notice unless you're there, like right in your face. I'm like, oh, this is a duplex. Like I didn't realize it looks like a single house, but it's not. So there's little areas like that have duplexes, and that's one area. There's some areas over there in the Meadowwood area that also has some duplexes, and then we have apartment buildings like in the Ally Drive area, in Balsam Road, and then some apartments in Orchard Ridge, but they're for older adults, and so it's not most of this district. It is single family home. Okay.
Yeah. And like you say, you can encourage or even prohibit or whatever different kinds of housing and different kinds of construction.
Yep.
By zoning.
Yeah, by zoning. So for another perfect example that I just was interesting for me on the last election, knocking doors. There's a lot of people aging at home. We have a growing aging population that wants to stay at home. And these houses, I mean, like these people open the door and you take a peek of inside and there's stairs, there's all these, it's just like a lot going on there. So, and I think that's a healthy thing. I mean, as a Puerto Rican, our elders stay at home. We don't send them to nursing homes and things like that. That's just the way that we were raised. I mean, they maybe do it now, but that's not how I was raised. Yeah. So that's fine, but then what that means is then that we have to be even more proactive about having an environment around them that is safe. Like, for example, many places in District 10 do not have sidewalks. They're not. So when you're aging at home, you want to make sure that people have a safe path to get from point A to point B. And also we have places that maybe they want to age at home, but they can move in the backyard on the ADU, a smaller 900 square foot housing, and then rent the other side, or the family can live, their kids can live in one, and they can have the granny flats and the granny buildings, flats, is that what they call them? Yeah, the granny flats in the backyard. So the possibilities are really unlimited. I mean, I have been. Yeah, I turned that age when AARP is becoming relevant. Can't believe I'm saying that. Yeah. So, but I didn't know how much emphasis that they put in housing themselves, right? So I had learned a lot also from them, and how they talk a lot about zoning in their magazine, how to create these spaces for people aging at home. So housing goes from from young families to older adults. And as we age through life, we have different needs and different, different safeguards, different necessities that to, as it's not the same when you're raising a baby than when you're already almost at the end of your life and you still want to stay at home. So, and with that comes change, and housing and zoning is a way to kind of like move you through it. So
that makes sense. Turning now to your role as council president, there's been a couple of meetings lately that have gotten a bit contentious. How do you feel like this as a member of the council, as a member of this body where you have 20 people who have to work together? There's years and years it's been a thing that the city council meetings are too long and everybody talks too much, and now they're getting a bit dicey at times. Is there anything is that okay? Is that just good, healthy debate, or something need to change and get better? What do you think?
20 people and then 20 so very different people. I think, right, 4 years ago when we, everybody's declaring the most diverse council in the city of Madison, us in that group, we were all like looking at each other like, yeah, here we go, putting us on the pedestal that this is not gonna, like, come on, like, it's not, we are not all the same people, right? We just because we are the same, had the same cultural background or skin color, we just have very different views sometimes. So personally, what I had learned is that, the way again, my brain as a business process person, I work in flowcharts and my brain just goes process wise, right? And I am used to working with people that don't like change. And my job is to bring change. Like, that's what literally every integration is, right? So to integrate one system to the different system, it's difficult when a small tiny company is purchased by a giant company. That's an integration of humans that is happening, and you have to get aligned with processes and procedures. So having that mindset, I will work with anybody. I don't care if you like me or don't like me. I don't care if we agree or disagree on most issues. But if there's something that we are both passionate about and you want to work on that and focus on that work, I have always been open to that. And I think most others are like that. So, but again, if there's no commitment to have that, that is not, that rule of engagement is not agreed on, this time at council is so limited that I'm just going to go and then pair with people that want to do the work, right? So I don't sweat much some of the negativity. People seem to always bucketize us on like the whole, like all of us are problematic. And of course, we each are problematic at some point or another. I get that. But if people really do look deeper into how things are running, you'll see that this is a repetitive set of behaviors from the same people, and that majority of council really comes prepared to council, do their homework, ask questions to staff, engage with the public, really come prepared to make sure that the time of other people is respected, as well as the time of the constituents that are coming to these meetings. So I will continue to do what I have done. I have been also very lucky to have established relationships with multiple people on staff that have, anytime I have a question, it's like, if that person doesn't know, they direct me to the next person. So I love to always be learning. It's just something that my brain, I'm a sponge for new things. So the council can be very challenging, and that's the part I like about it. I like the challenge of the item in front of me. The rest of the noise around it, I have learned that sometimes it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Can the council be more efficient? Yes. We put things in place. Like, for example, we changed the order of operations of the council in the first year, I think it was. I want to say February of 2000, or the first term, but I'm not sure. But we changed it, or maybe the second year. We changed the order of operations where we take all testimony at the very beginning of the meeting, before you have to wait until each item was discussed. That was really to encourage more people to come and share their feelings or their input. So we made that change. We had really tried to kind of stick to ordinances that are in the books but nobody follows, like the 10-minute rule or the like we just really try to remind each other, like, okay, let's be courteous or whatever. But at the end of the day, each person in council is responsible for their own behavior, and doesn't matter. I mean, again, these as a president, I spent a year putting processes in place that people had in their brains that they were not written down, they were not established, so there's no continuity. So now if anyone on the council staff decides to go and get another job, we had that in writing and we can pass that to the next person.
Right.
So for me, that has been my focus the entire year, like really creating policy that helps council members with their work, and the same for the council office.
Well, thank you so much for your time. How do people get in touch with you or support your campaign?
So for the campaign, you can go, this is a long one, but it's my first name, Janet. So YANNETTE, the number 4, Madison.com. So JanetForMadison.com. And again, it's YANNETTE for Madison. And you have all the information there. You can find the ActBlue link for donate, to send donations, or the address to send a check if you want to. You also have the link in there for District 10 in Facebook, and the link for Instagram is also there. Okay. So.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck as the campaign goes forward.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me here.
365 Amplified is produced and edited by me, Rob Chappell, and is a production of 365 Media Foundation, a nonprofit, local, independent media organization in Madison, Wisconsin. Wherever you're listening to this right now, hit the subscribe or follow button to get new episodes every Friday. And between episodes, get your latest news at madison365.org and follow us on Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Threads. Wherever you get your news, we'll be there.